Today we got Brian Butler-Au from Sucker Punch. Obviously, Max Holloway's manager, Felice Herrig's manager. I got to be honest with you. You're one of the harder managers to figure out which people you have and don't have. So it's because it seems like you keep adding more to your roster every week. Like you keep getting more and more fighters. So it's tough to tell which ones, like when do I call you for this guy? When do I call you for that guy? Like I'm not real sure, you know?
I don't think we're really adding many. I don't know. I mean, we manage quite a few, so.
Well, what it is that they're getting on the radar more and more. And it
Yeah,
seems like that your fighters are finding a way to cut through the noise that seems to be going on right now in MMA, where everyone is becoming more and more WWE and more entertainment and a lot less traditional martial arts. But a lot of your clients are traditional in that sense where there's not trash talkers. There's not. They just go out there and do their thing and come home. Have you found that to be a struggle to get above that noise?
No, this business is kind of like highs and lows, and you know, we've been fortunate enough to have a lot of quality fighters that are just on a good rise. And I really do feel like we represent good people. I don't really represent anybody that I actually don't feel is a good person.
Okay.
And there's plenty of them in the business. So, yeah, I don't know. Fortunate.
Have you turned down fighters that have come to you and you just felt like it wasn't going to be a good fit?
We have. Yep. Yeah. We're not just out there hunting to have a huge roster. We really are pretty selective on who we represent. So, yeah, we don't take everybody.
Who is one of the biggest names that kind of faded away from you guys, and then like when they were gone, like, oh, I need to come back. Like I need to come back underneath your wing again. I didn't realize how good I had it. Have you had that experience yet?
I have had that experience. I'd prefer not to throw people under the bus about it. I actually don't.
Gotcha.
I kind of make it it's kind of been a policy of ours that we don't really take people back after
Oh,
they leave us. So, but I would say 90% of the time, if somebody does leave us, they ask to come back, but we just, you know,
okay.
just kind of made a firm policy that we don't take people back. I made one exception one time for a very good friend of mine, in the business, who's also a coach, former fighter, and it was the one exception.
Yeah, and the only exception, I actually know who it is, so I understand why that one came about. That one makes sense, but it's got to be tough though because you're in a field where numbers make money. The reality of it is you're going to have percentage wise very few title holders, very few title fights, very few champions compared to your entire roster. In a point where they're making money. Now, you may have champions of the lower leagues, but they're not making that much money. Like in a position where you can make money. So for you, you actually need volume to maintain your business. So do you really, like, every time someone comes back to you, do you kind of go, man, maybe I should change it again because this person could be a champ or could be in the title hunt within one or two fights, and all of a sudden that means good income for the management team?
You know, it's a tough position, but it's I feel like I feel like we've established relationships with our fighters that I feel is, I don't, maybe it's just me, but I feel like it's different than other management companies and their fighters. So I want to, it's to the point where when a fighter leaves my roster or does something like that, it doesn't happen often. We have a pretty
Yeah.
good retention ratio, but when it does happen, my other fighters get mad, and they'll be like, oh, that's messed up, that what, I hope you don't ever take them back, that type of thing. So,
Okay.
I'm very close with them. I don't know. It's a
Yeah.
tough situation, but I am fortunate enough to be in the situation now where we have a very solid roster of fighters where the revenue is there, and I'm not, going to really sweat, if a fighter thinks the grass is greener somewhere else.
You come from a really big advertising background where money is astronomical. There's got to be that point when you're in MMA management, you made the switch. It's like, look, this is what I want to do. This is my passion is. This is what I love. I'm doing this. When you got to that one fight, you're like, okay, we're okay now. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're all right now financially. We're able to survive into the next year. Do you remember what fight that was?
It's the weirdest thing, honestly. When I transitioned into this business, I hung on to my ad agency for almost 2 years, and to the point where I kept the office downtown, but I was minimizing my staff as I was fading away and from that business, and I kept paying for the office. And at some point, I don't know when I took this turn, but I was at a point where I was paying my mortgage. I had a couple of houses from the other,
Yeah.
and I was at a point where I was paying my mortgages on credit cards to try to stay in this MMA space. And,
Yeah.
I've said it before, Jens Pulver got me into this business, but Jeff Curran kept me in this business. He kept saying, he's like, man, I really think you can do well. Don't quit on us. Don't quit. So I stayed in it, and I, at just some point the bills were paid one month, and I was like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
And the next month I was like, oh, they're paid again. And so I feel weird talking about it because I don't even want to jinx it really, but it's been a steady upward rise. I feel like I got in at the right time uh, in the sport where I could kind of get in and really get to know everybody. I feel like I was on the ground floor of AOL, when
Yeah.
AOL took off, like I was the janitor.
Yeah, and honestly, you came at the right time. Like there was guys that kind of had your same philosophy. Monty Cox is one guy that pops in my head, but years ago, and there was no money back then, and he had to play a volume game. We had to have 75 guys on his roster, 100 guys on his roster, because you're looking at 2 and 2. Guys are making 1,500,
Right.
and he at one time he had all 5 champions. When the UFC only had 5 weight classes, he had all 5 champions at one point, and it was still a struggle to maintain. It's still hard at that point. Now the money's come up. The game has gotten bigger. There's more places to go. Um, do you feel like World Series of Fighting and Bellator are getting on an even playing field with the UFC? I mean, they're never going to catch them. Let's just be honest. Like the UFC is always going to be the biggest dog in the room, unless they do a complete mess up and screw themselves up. Like there's no way. They're always going to be the biggest shot. But do you feel like that the other two are kind of getting on strong footing with them?
I mean, I feel like they're competitive options for fighters, but obviously every fighter's goal is to be in the UFC. But I do feel that Bellator and World Series of Fighting are being competitive with some of the money that they're paying. Um, and you know, but it's not the UFC for every fighter's dream is the UFC. So
Right. The biggest issue I have with World Series of Fighting and Bellator is that the money's comparable, but then the amount of fights and the depth of roster are not there. So these guys are like Justin Gaethje. He's running the gamut. He's 16-0, and there's no one really for him to fight. He's fighting a guy here that is coming off a loss for the title fight. It's like it's difficult. Same thing with Bellator, that they're having a hard time getting enough fights. And so you're right. If I'm not only am I with the UFC making the same amount of money as I would with the other ones, but I'm also have the potential to fight 3 or 4 times a year as opposed to once or twice. So that's a big deal.
yeah,
You know,
I'm not familiar. I don't manage Justin, so I
right?
can't really speak on him. But from what I understand, he is making a pretty decent paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
I would be surprised if, I mean, maybe now that he's established himself and defended his title so much, but it took World Series to build him to where he is. If he's going to go to the UFC and the UFC is going to pay him that money, he wouldn't get nowhere near that money if he
Right.
didn't establish himself in World Series. So, and I know World Series is, paying him quite a chunk. Surprising that an organization of that size would pay that amount.
Yeah, I mean they're well. It's not that surprising now that I saw this morning for their New Year's Eve card on December 3rd. Do you have anybody on that card? Anyone that you're managing on that card?
Jake Hune.
Okay, so there's going to be an appearance, of course, with Ray Sefo, who's the president. So of course he's going to be there. But they also have Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture coming in for that New Year's Eve show, and I kind of know the numbers. Like it's not cheap to get those guys in. Yes, of course, it seems like Chuck just got released from the UFC, from his job at the UFC. He's now moving over to World Series of Fighting. Is it a one-off? Is it a total off? But they're putting money out there for this New Year's Eve show.
They are. I would probably do things a little different. I mean, some of those decisions I
Yeah,
pretty
right.
fair amount of, yeah.
Yeah, right. Like it's so for the folks at home. Brian and I text back and forth a couple times a month about different random crap. Not always MMA. Sometimes the kids. sometimes what's going on with this thing or that thing. And so there's a lot of stuff that managers can say privately, but won't ever say publicly because it ruins their business, and you have to respect the business. Speaking of business, I kind of was a little salty when Max got the title fight because it was Rashad can't fight, and we lost the main event. We don't really have a choice now. What are we going to do? Oh, let's make this an interim title, as opposed to it always being the interim title. Am I disenfranchised with that? Am I being just too much of a fanboy, where I'm like, oh, I don't like the way the title fight actually came about?
I can understand people's perspective on it. We really didn't know that it was going to be that way either. But from my point of view, when they offered it, it was a no-brainer to me just because, Max is on a 9-fight win streak, and I feel like he deserved a title shot a couple fights prior already. So, yeah, let's make it a title fight, and against somebody like Anthony Pettis. I mean,
Yeah.
who is going to be a Hall of Famer, who is, one of the best in ever. I mean, why not? But like I said, I felt like Max deserved a title fight, long before this one. So it was, from my perspective, we were, whatever they wanted to do, we were fine with it. We were ready to fight if it wasn't a title fight. So
Yeah. So now he's got this interim belt. Of course, the rumors came out. Hey, Jose wants to fight, whatever, February 11th or whatever the hell it was. It's a title fight. My opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong. The guy that's on a 10-fight winning streak that took the former champ who had to relinquish his belt to a decision loss, has jammed his way. And that's the last loss he had was to McGregor. He's run his way through the gamut of everybody else. Never complained, never bitched. And then you have the other guy on the other side, just got knocked out in 13 seconds. He was asking for his release because he wants to go on and do something else. He's still complaining about he wants his release to go on and do something else. And he's trying to call out and dictate when the fight's going to happen to unify the belts. My personal opinion, and I might be biased, is that Max gets to call the shot, not Jose. Yes, he's right now the undisputed champ is what they're calling him. But the reality of it is he lost. The belt was taken from him. They gave him the belt back again because Conor had to let go of the belt. Am I wrong in that thought process that Max should be able to call when the fight happens and when it's going to go?
yeah, I mean, first of all, Max is the type of guy that will fight anytime, anywhere. There's no issue there. But yeah, I do feel that Max should be able to call shots on it because, Aldo has a history of just not showing up, and Max is, honestly, Max just fought. He was in order for this fight to happen, Max would have had to go straight back into training camp, and he was actually ready to do that. I mean, when I knew about the honest truth is I knew about the option of the fight before uh, of the Aldo fight before Max did. I didn't tell it to Max because I'm not going to tell Max, hey, get through Pettis. We're going to have Aldo in February. You know what I mean? I'm not going to get that in his head before a fight.
Right.
So Max had no idea until Dana told him in the cage after the fight, you know? And
Oh,
so when Dana told him that, Max was like, fuck yeah, well,
yeah.
do it, and his adrenaline was still pumping. And then, after the press conference and all that stuff, we went to eat and he started like saying his foot was hurting, and then he took off his shoe and the thing was like, poof, woke up in the morning and he could barely walk. And it turned out when he got back to Hawaii, he went to the hospital or to the doctor, and same doctor that did his foot when he fought Connor,
Mm-hmm.
which everybody seems to forget. Max
Yeah.
blew his ankle out in the first round of that fight with Connor, and did the X-rays, and he basically re-injured the exact same injury that he did with Connor, and the foot looks nasty, and he has to stay off it for 6 weeks. So, after that, it doesn't really work out to jump in right after that, because after the 6 week is over, his actual gym is moving. So there's a couple of things. So it's not looking like we're going to be able to do anything until,
April.
May, late April, May.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just the truth. And
Well, that's good because it allows me to save up some more money so I can fly out to the fight. Toronto was expensive. It was a hard trip to get to, especially coming from Hawaii. It was a hard way to get out there. So there,
yeah,
this is big. Okay, so I got to ask, man. you dress. I see. Max is starting to dress like you, where he's got the suits on. He's a guy from the west side of Oahu. Like they don't wear suits and ties. So he's obviously taking your lead. He's using your same tailor. What the hell was that tie? I don't.
So yeah, our tailor, well, the tailor for Sucker Punch is Todd Goldsmith Customs. The guy is he's awesome, and he takes care of us. But the tie was all Max's idea. He found it on the internet, and then he told me, he's like, Butler, he's like, you got to wear one too. And I was like, Max, I was like, I'm not wearing a freaking plastic tie. I was like, you're kidding me. He's like, if I'm fighting for the belt, Butler, you're doing what? I was like,
Nice.
I was like, all right, man, I'll wear the damn plastic tie. So I ordered it, and every time I hate on him, I do hate on him for his style, his little flair. But
Yeah.
people love it. People came up to me with my tie. They're like, holy cow, your tie is awesome. I was like, all right.
Yeah, thanks. It's not my style, but all right. Yeah, no, I mean it fit Max for sure, but it did look odd on you. For sure.
I jump on a grenade for my guy every now and then.
Yeah. Well, I think that one might have been 2 grenades at one time. Let's talk about the women's 145 pound. So Cyborg says no because she can't make weight in time, and they call you immediately after, or how does that break out?
There was talks going on for a while about that potential fight, and it was just timing wise. Jermaine had just joined the police academy, and things like that kind of were pushing things off and postponing things, and the dates weren't working. Finally, the dates worked out, and things worked out the way they did, and Cyborg needed more time, and they offered us the fight for Holly, and we'd been wanting to fight Holly for a while now, so it works out.
So I got to ask. I've talked to a couple other fighters, and they're like, "Yeah, with the new management team in place, the new owners of the UFC, like the way they're doing things, getting pre-fight medicals is getting a little bit harder. Like how to get stuff arranged is getting a little bit more difficult." And this is from sporadic, different fighters and different levels within the UFC. Have you found it harder to get negotiations done, especially on this Jermaine contract, or was it just as easy as it's always been? Or just as rough as it's always been?
All of that stuff has been relatively, the same. There's been a couple of things with new people involved and getting to know who's handling what, but those are just, I think those are normal for any transition, and I think that'll smoothen out, but for the most part, it's been business as usual. I haven't really noticed much of a glitch at all. Obviously, Joe Silva's leaving. His last show is going to be on the 30th, and I think everybody's going to miss Joe. We're actually, Max and I are flying out there just to be at his last show. Actually, don't have anybody on that card, so we're going out there to just kind of celebrate his last show.
Which is kind of surprising. I figured that you would have somebody on that last card. Did it just not fit, or did something happen where someone couldn't get on it, or did it?
No, I did actually. I had a couple people on it, and injuries happened.
Okay.
So I had Sabah Hamasi on the card, and then I had Angela Hill was going to be on that card, bringing her back, and
that's right. She got caught in the USADA mix-up. That's right. I totally forgot.
The USADA clause. I mean, I don't want to say that in a way where Angela got busted for nothing, but there's a clause in USADA that's being changed right now, in large part because of Angela, that any UFC vet cannot come back to the UFC unless they've been re-enrolled in the USADA program for 4 months prior to their comeback. But they could sign any schmuck off the street and fight them tomorrow.
And that's always been confusing because it's not re-enroll in USADA. Like it happened to BJ Penn too. He got pushed off his first fight. Then of course he got injured and what have you. That he was never on USADA ever, and then was like, hey, I'm getting ready to go, and like, oh yeah, you have to sign for USADA for 4 months. And he was like, oh, I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to go. Like, oh no, because you're a former UFC fighter, you have to be on USADA for that.
Yeah. Re-enroll was the wrong word. Yeah, you're right.
But it's crazy that they would even think that was. I understood the re-enrollment. Like you've been on it before, you got released from the UFC for whatever reason, you come back, we need to have you on for 4 months. I kind of understand that process, but never being on it then all of a sudden forcing you to have to be on it just because you were in the UFC before?
Honestly, I don't even understand that process though.
It's
because from my understanding from talking to Joe about it, it's USADA thinks that it was a way for the fighters to get away from being tested. Like, oh, I'm gonna get busted. Okay, I'm gonna retire and then come back when I'm clean. So that was their thought process for it. But that's no way a fighter would. You know how hard it is to get into the UFC.
Yeah.
There's no way they would risk retiring and coming back just to get out of a drug test. So their thought process was a little too strict on it, I think. And that clause I think is going to be changed late January. They're making an amendment to it, so it won't be an issue anymore, and hopefully we'll get Angela back in there.
Yeah, I love watching her fight, man. She's dynamic and explosive. I forgot, actually, like I said, I forget who you have and who you don't have. I totally forgot you had her. We've talked about her before. So that really, when I saw her, when she put the video out of her, the reason why I can't get on it, like, I was heartbroken. I was like, man, I really wanted this. I really wanted her to be able to get in there and fight on that card. It's a big card of the year. It was huge. It was going to be a big deal. Obviously, for the women that night, it's even bigger because Ronda Rousey's back, and so it makes it a big deal in that position. Last thing before you let you out of here, I know you got errands to run and what have you today. So you and I have talked about Max a lot. We've known. I'm friends with him. You're friends with him. I mean, you manage him. Like, we all know, Holloway's deal. We knew 3 or 4 fights ago he was going to be in this title hunt. We just knew it was going to happen. Who else on your roster that you think is like right on the cusp of being that next guy where you're like, we're going to be talking about him in a year and a half, where he's like, hey, he's ready, and he's ready to be, or she is even ready to be in the mix
for titles?
Yeah.
Gosh, a lot of my fighters I feel are solid and could go. I mean, I feel Colby Covington is a really, really tough fight for anybody in the division. He's just a grinder, and he's getting better every time. I've got some prospects that I feel are, when my partner found Max and we saw Max and he only had 4 fights, you see a guy like that and you're like, whoa, this kid is special. We have a couple of guys like that now that I feel are special, and you'll be hearing from them in 2017 for sure.
Colby Covington was actually the name that I had in my head. That I was wanting to see if you agreed with me or not that he's going to be in that space, because you know these guys better than I do. You actually know these guys better than most managers know their fighters. You seem to get really intimate with them, and so I'm glad to know that my mindset on his fights is actually pretty close to what you think as well. So,
yeah.
Brian, you're in a weird position because you're very vocal, you're very boisterous, but you also have to play the political game of being PC all the time and you don't want to say anything because it's going to mess up your fighters, and it's like it costs them income and costs them being able to provide diapers and get babies. So I really do understand how difficult it is for you to be in that space and play that political game, where you still can get the best advantage for your fighters, but also still put stuff out there about your fighters without snapping anything.
Yeah, I feel like we just, play by the rules and we're just honest, and that's about it.
Joe, you and Joe Silver, you talked about him a second ago. You and Joe Silver are actually friends. Don't you guys live pretty close to each other?
We do. We actually would spar with each other. Sorry, I'm just getting over a flu. We would spar with each other a few times a week, but as of late, he's got a torn tendon or something in his shoulder, and he hasn't been able to. But he swears once he's retired, he's going to be getting some Kictionary videos and just practicing his kicks all day long. That's all he wants to do.
Good for him. He is to stay active in his retirement.
People always say Joe spars. I'm like, yeah, he spars, and they're like, is he good? It's like, he is surprisingly good. Yeah. And I say surprisingly, he's gonna be like, you fucker. But
yeah, well, no, I mean, you look at his stature, you look at his body type, you do the visual look, you're like, all right, so what's he do? He's doing jazzercise. Like, what's he really going to do? But I've seen him kind of screw around a little bit, and they're like, oh, he actually has the technique and the ability, keeps his elbows in, and you can't help it from being around the sport for as long as he has to pick up something, but you can tell it's not something he picked up. It's something he trains and goes after. You can tell the difference.
Yeah, he's been doing martial arts since he was a kid, and I think the one weird story about him is that I think I'm getting this right, is that he doesn't drive. He doesn't have a driver's
Yeah.
license,
Still.
and
Yep.
the reason he doesn't is because I guess his father gave him a choice to either get a driver's license and a car or take martial arts classes. And he chose to take martial arts classes, and he never drove since. He never got a license since then. So he's a Taekwondo based guy. He's very kick based, kick centric, and he's unorthodox type of style. So he can chamber his kicks really well. So even if you're in close on him, you think you're gonna just maul him, he can still get his little leg up there and hit you in the gut.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would love. Actually, I want to see some footage of you guys sparring.
He does not like to have footage taped on him because he's funny about that. But
He's really weird. Like he's super. It's almost like he's super camera shy, but he's not. He just likes keeping everything private.
he keeps everything private. He's a good guy. He's one of those guys that you can get into it with him business wise, and he can be hard, and he can be you think that you're not going to be friends with him anymore, and then you get a text message the next day of his new action figure that he got from Amazon.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's awesome. Well, Brian, thanks for coming on here, man. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. You're gonna have a great rest of the year, obviously, and then into 2017. Sucker Punch is going to be one of the names that every management, that every fighter is looking to get managed by. So it's great to have you on here, man. I appreciate it. Have a great Christmas, a happy New Year, and we'll talk to you later.
Yeah, man. You too.